Welcome to the Wildverse podcast, where we introduce you to the wild world of taxidermy, a place where artists and hunters collide. I'm Heather.
And I'm Ashley.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the details of our trip to Colorado and exactly what we were doing there. But we're also going to talk about different ways we each do our habitat work for the mounts in our own shops.
We thought that this episode would be perfect timing after the fact that we were just on a major habitat collecting trip.
Yeah, I also thought that it would be great to do an episode kind of focused on actual how-tos in taxidermy. I know we did the How to Become a Taxidermist episode, but I'm excited to share some knowledge and hopefully some videos I'll take, as well as how to put together some nice habitats in an efficient manner.
Yeah, I am excited to hear what you have to say too. Y'all in your shop do a lot more habitat than I do personally. And, habitat's one of those things that you can always improve on, right? There's always just new methods and different methods to try. It's just fun to try different things. And there's just a lot of different, so many different ways to get different results.
Yeah, I'm excited too to see what you might do that's different than mine. But we'll get to that kind of at the end of the episode. We're going to start it off with our Colorado adventure. Anybody who kind of follows us on social media probably saw that we were out there and collecting wood and all this other stuff. So we thought we would kind of touch on how that went. So I guess we'll start with why we were out there. The shop that I work for, Westner's Taxidermy, is we have a lot of big stuff that we have to put wood on, and we're pretty much out of wood. So it worked out that I could go out there, and I invited Ashley, and she was able to go with. And we needed wood, and we needed grass, and we decided that we'd take a week-long trip out to Colorado and collect as much as we could.
Yeah, you guys use so much of the pretty wood that you can get, and it was obviously worth it because you guys are a big shop to have you and I go out, collect a bunch of stuff. That's obviously not something that maybe a smaller shop could fund or whatever, but for you guys, it worked out to have us go and literally get a truckload of wood. So if anybody, like you're saying, if anybody follows us on Facebook or Instagram, you maybe saw we filled a whole truckload of this twisted juniper, the really pretty twisted branches. And you and I personally were cutting all this stuff and loading it up and then sent it off to Pennsylvania. And you guys haven't got that yet, right?
No, it's actually, so we're recording on Saturday and it's supposed to get to the shop on Monday. So it's pretty quick, actually.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I'm so excited to hear how that's going to go.
Yeah. So what I did, because my boss was like, look, you can handle figuring this all out. I found a company that was price efficient in the right size trailer. So at first I looked into pods because I thought those moving pods would be perfect. They come drop it off at your location, you fill it up, they pick it up and they ship it to wherever you need it shipped. But they were smaller than what we got, and they also didn't service where we are in Pennsylvania, which was weird to me. They could get it to Colorado, but they couldn't get it back to us in Pennsylvania, which I thought was just weird. We used U-Pack, and it was you see those super doubles that trucks haul on the highways. They're 28 foot long, and they just dropped it off where we needed them to drop it off, and we filled it up and called them when we were done, and then they picked it up and shipped it back to us and charged us for the amount of space we used, which, Ashley, is a 28-foot trailer, and we thought we filled it. It was 26 foot they charged us for, so we saved $200.
Oh, well, that's cool because, we left room. There was a ramp, so we put the ramp in. We could have filled the whole thing easily if that was an option, I guess. So I'm glad you saved a little bit of money there.
Yeah, I don't know how we could have filled it to the end and still fit the ramp in there, so that's fine with me. It was pretty full.
Yeah, to me, that was a full trailer. We were 2 feet away from the door, and we had that thing packed. We were stuffing this twisted juniper in wherever we could, obviously trying to salvage as much of the branches as possible so they weren't breaking. And it was like a game of Tetris, fitting everything in there. And then we collected a bunch of grass, dirt even, and just other cool stuff that we found in the habitat. department.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that trailer is not going to be fun to unload because they are like, so many of the branches are like wedged in there. And I mean, I don't know if they'll see it on the video, probably not. Like, I got so many scratches and stuff on my arms.
Me too.
Yeah, it doesn't show up, but I'm so scratched up because you reach into that wood and it just
and then
rips you.
Heather, you had a gnarly little scratch on your chin.
Yeah.
How's that?
It's healing up pretty good. It's just a little mark there.
Yeah, it was funny. Like halfway through, Heather gets a scratch right on her chin, so it looks like a cool scar from this wood.
Yeah, I thought about putting those tribal lines just to look cool.
Did look cool.
Yeah, I walked up to the top of this little ridge where there was this cool like top I wanted to cut off of this dead tree because it was real twisted and had cool parts to it. So I chainsaw it off, falls, and then I'm all over like all this stuff grows where it's really hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we went all the way to Colorado for this, and because we have like cedars here, which are junipers, but they don't get the twisted, so you climbed up on this big ridge, you were trying to get like some cool pieces, and I don't even know where you went. You come back and you're all bloodied up.
Yeah, I picked up this piece of wood, and I don't know if I like tried to adjust it because it was heavy, and it just bam, popped me right in the mouth. And of course I was like mad. I wanted to throw it, but I didn't.
Throw it off
the cliff. Cool. Yeah. And then I'm like, man, that really hurt. Like, that's gotta be bleeding. I like touched my hand to it. I'm like, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, you handled that really well.
Yeah, but yeah, they like growing on rocks. They like growing in windy areas, and it seems like they like the south side better because we'd be on the north side of a ridge and it was all just normal cedar trees. And then you'd cross over to the side that's like a straight cliff, and there they are.
Yeah, then they get twisted. I know we hypothesized on like the wind, making them twist and stuff. I don't know the actual reason why the juniper gets these cool twists in it, but it's cool. They're so pretty. So that was like, I mean, some of the problems we encountered, right? Like we just had to collect this stuff in gnarly territory. Even if it wasn't hard to get to the truck, even driving out in the truck to these places, obviously we needed 4-wheel drive, and just, getting to these places was a little bit, not a challenge, but it's just kind of an adventure.
It was, like we'd drive past this little road and we're like, I mean, it looks like it's a 4-wheeler trail. Like, can we make it back there in your truck?
Can we make it in my truck? Yeah.
And then, a lot of it worked out. I guess we should kind of touch on where we collected in the southeast of Colorado, I guess, right?
I think it was like south central. No, I guess southeast. Like we were in the desert parts of Colorado.
And then we were collecting our wood on pretty much just like private ground. My boss has a cousin out there, and the wood was just everywhere on his property. Yeah, it was cool terrain, a lot of cactus. I guess that could touch into any problems that we ran into.
Oh yeah, literally ran into these problems.
Yeah,
there's cactus everywhere out there, and they have what's called walking sticks, and those are we'll put a picture up. But those are kind of gnarly. I mean, everything with pokes is gnarly, but those in particular got us pretty good a few times.
Yeah, they somehow like worked. So I had hiking boots on. I didn't think it through. They're like leather, but they're like suede leather. And then they have the little vents in them. And I just wasn't thinking about cactus. But you actually had like leather work boot hiking boots. And somehow those cactus still worked through there and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think I was maybe a little bit better off, but they still were able to get into the boot. And then I pulled my sock off one day and I was trying to get one out, and you're like, oh, there's another one in your foot. Like I didn't even feel that. So we were just getting like attacked by these things.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge. Had the dog with us, and she obviously, little tenderfoot girl, she got into cactus pretty good a few times.
Yeah, poor thing. I have to tell a little bit of the story where we were just like walking around checking stuff out, and she was of course going with us, and we get up into this one spot where it's like kind of a big rock, a walking stick cactus, and then kind of a rock in the front, but we kind of thought that she'd be able to maybe follow us a little bit, but her legs are also like that long, so maybe not.
She's tiny leg.
But there was a walking stick that was like across the little opening. It wasn't very
So we
high.
stepped over it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you and I stepped over it, but it was blocking like the entrance quote. You know?
Yeah. So I picked her up and like, moved her so she could follow us. We get to hiking over these rocks, and the next thing you know, she's not behind us. And Ashley's like, I need to go find her.
And so she was still stuck in that same spot. And when I rounded the corner, I heard her howling for us, like, "Come back, come get me."
She was stuck literally between a rock and a hard place. Poor little dog.
She was. She's so tiny. She did pretty good.
Yeah, you should have seen too when Ashley is pulling the cactus out of her foot. That her dog is just sitting in the back with her eyes kind of like, you guys are a bunch of wussies. Like, I ran through this stuff all week.
Oh yeah, when I was pulling the cactus out of my own foot, she's like, "Really? Like, you're gonna let that bother you?"
I've literally been running barefoot through them all week. You guys are a bunch of wusses.
She really did. She looked at us like we were just. She was disgusted with us. We went out there for a full week. It was like Saturday through Saturday.
Yeah.
We spent, the trailer showed up Monday. We spent a good 4 days filling it up. We were cutting a little bit on Sunday. So like about 5 days of cutting, 4 days of loading. So that was like, I think, a good enough time. Like we used our time really wisely, got a lot done at first, and then, we're able to kind of be maybe a little bit choosy towards the end, but we still we were hustling the whole time.
Yeah. I know that one day I think we cut, it was like 60 some pieces, wasn't it?
Oh, it was like 2 days, or no, something like that. Like one of those days we were just going at it.
Yeah.
We got a ton of pieces done. We ended up getting, like, our goal was like 200 pieces, right? And then we got a little bit less, but we had some huge pieces in there. Like, they were massive.
Yeah.
And I think they were like 16 feet long. Yeah. We were being really ambitious when we cut those.
Yeah. So, people, you don't realize how big some of these are because they're out in the wild with all this other big stuff. And you're like, that piece looks good. And then you carry it to your truck. And then we're like, oh my gosh, this thing is so big.
Yeah, we put it in my truck with a 6-foot bed. It's not even 6 foot. It's like 5'7" or whatever. And it's hanging off the back. We're like, ooh, that's kind of large. And then we put it in the trailer. It can't even stand up. So we lay it sideways. And so there's some pretty large pieces in there. Y'all can probably get a couple cuts off of.
Yeah, I think there's at least 20 pieces that can be cut into even more than like 2 or 3 pieces. So yeah, our numbers ended up really good. And I was shocked.
And we got a good variety, right?
A lot of cool, so we kept track as we loaded this wood. We had 4 different colors. We had pink ones, which we only had 10 of those, I think. Those were like the super cool pieces that we wanted to make sure we marked as the cool pieces. And then we had like yellow for large, blue for medium, green for small. And we ended up getting like almost even numbers across the board.
Yeah, we were pretty even on stuff, because obviously some of the little ones, they've got cool twists, but they're not, you can't put a deer on them, but you could put like a, pine marten on them, or like even a bobcat for some of them. So we got a lot of variety. And then you do a lot of turkeys. So you were saying, oh, this would be a good turkey limb, having in mind like what they're going to be used for while we're picking them. So we're not just like, oh, that looks cool, let's take it. Oh, well, actually it looks cool, but it doesn't really work for taxidermy purposes.
Yeah, it really helped that we both kind of knew what we were looking for. We had sent people out before to collect wood, and it's not that they did a bad job, but it's not easy if you're not like really sure what you're using this stuff for to know what pieces are good. Because we did a lot of walking around that we found pieces that those people had hacked off and like threw to the side, and we're like, wow, like that's a really nice piece.
Yeah. So just coming from our perspective into it, I think, like attachment points, like stability, like how it could curve around an animal, all kinds of stuff that like maybe you don't think of unless you're actually the one to be putting this stuff together.
Yeah.
So it helps that we were, we both kind of know what we're looking for. Like I even had specific pieces in mind that I'm going to be doing here soon that I'm like, oh, that would be good for that project that I'm working on. Like, so it's kind of helpful to have just an idea.
But like, I was shocked we finished as early as we did. We had the trailer loaded up and shut and locked by Thursday. So then we didn't leave till Saturday. So on our day off, we were like, man, what are we going to do to like adventure around? All week we had been looking for antlers, okay? Like we were in some pretty deery country and we didn't find squat. So we did some research and found some areas that like we're like, okay, seems like it's where the deer might be, you know, in the wintertime. And Ashley was definitely very determined to find some as well.
Yeah, I had my eyes set on like I was thinking about sheds all week long because it's like, right now we're like the animals shed in the springtime. Usually they shed their antlers then, and I wanted to just point out real quick, Colorado does have a shed season, but we were in an area that didn't have the shed season. So I want to preface that too. So we weren't doing anything like illegal. No. We were in the correct zone and all that. We looked on the map, found some cool places, hiked around. Heather ended up finding a deadhead deer, which was cool.
Yeah, I was excited about that. I was standing there. So Ashley, you seem like you're more of a walker and looker. Like you'd get through an area a lot faster than I would. Like I'd take maybe like 10 steps and then I'd just like stop and I'd just like scan. And I remember we went through that little ravine, old like wash, probably when it rains a lot, it runs through there. And you were up ahead of me a little bit and we were talking about this bone that we both saw. And I'm just like standing in this ditch and I'm just looking and I happen to look over and I'm like, I found one.
Just this hearing you like just so excited was so awesome. Like I loved it. It was and I was excited. We were both like just giddy about it. So we were like, we were successful,
Have high hopes after all week. Like we were in some areas that I was like, we have to find an antler. Like there's deer tracks and poop everywhere and nothing.
Yeah, like deery places, elky looking places, we were not looking, that's for sure. So the fact that we were able to like go into an area we've never been and like, actually be successful finding these little treasures that just makes it a little more special too. So yeah, and it's a nice like deadhead. It was, just a little bit older, but like it was still all intact and it had a cool like kicker off the side, like just something cool.
Yeah.
And it was a mule deer.
It was. I mean, mule deer was the first mule deer, shed that I've ever found, deadhead, whatever. So we found that and we walked around that area for a while. And then we got back in the truck, and I think was it the second area we went to that you found yours? Because I think we only checked 3 areas.
Yeah, I think it was a second area. So we found another spot. We're like, okay, this looks good. Let's get out and walking around. And I found one also. I found just a regular shed. And it was a pretty good one. And I think the reason I found it was because my dog kind of ran away. She got something interesting on her mind. So I had to go look for her. So I'm like, I was all mad, but she took me into an area I might not have stepped into because of it. So
yeah, it worked out good. I know. I thought you fell at first because I don't even remember what noise you made, but you made some noise, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I found one. And then at first you thought it was an elk because you couldn't see the back of it. You could just because I think there was a big stump or something there, and you just saw like the top.
Yeah, like a tree.
Yeah.
I just saw 3 blades of an antler, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's super cool. But we felt really accomplished too for the fact that, I mean, even everywhere that we were getting wood, there was very little that you were just walking like level. It was all either up, down, or sideways. Like my knees and ankles were feeling it by the end of the week because there was so much rotation going on.
It's kind of gnarly country there in Colorado. Like, it's the Rockies, right?
Yeah.
A lot of rocks.
It's a lot of rocks and cactus.
Yeah, a lot of rocks and cactus. And yeah, so then some people might be wondering, well, can I just go out and do this? Like, can I go collect a bunch of wood and bring it home? And like, kind of, so we were fortunate to be on private land and, when we were collecting the wood. So that's obviously legal to cut your own trees down on your own land. So we were super fortunate enough to do that. If a person just wanted to go out there, like it is possible that you could get like permits to cut wood on like, public lands and stuff.
Yeah, so you can buy firewood permits, which when we were even walking around on BLM land, we saw a lot of stuff that looked super cool that people had cut, to just burn. So that kind of was like,
Yeah,
man, what a waste.
I know. It was probably a beautiful piece and it was just cut off to be put into a fireplace. We're like, oh.
When I was looking it up, if you can't just, I don't think you can just get firewood permits and then use it if you're selling it. So I think it's like a gray area. I think you'd have to call the BLM, say what you're doing if you want to be 100% legal, and then they can get you like a special permit that probably costs a little bit more than the firewood permit to then cut on BLM for something you're going to sell.
Yeah, so basically, like, don't just go out on public land, start cutting stuff down. Really, like, call the Fish and Wildlife Service or call the Bureau of Land Management. Like, get in touch with somebody to make sure that, like, what you're doing is legal because there is places you cannot cut. There
Yeah.
is places that, like, it's okay to cut wood. It's, and if you are cutting, there might be some parameters. Like, if it's, you have to leave a stump of so many inches high or you have to, only take dead wood or there's a lot of like random laws
Yeah.
pertaining to it, so it's good to just check that out. So yeah, don't just go out and start cutting everything down.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a lot of dead stuff, but like we said, it's not easy to get to. Like, even when we would drive through BLM, because it is cool to go up through BLM and there's so many roads and stuff, and there were so many big, awesome looking pieces, but you had to, like, you'd have to climb all the way up and like through a little canyon or two to even get to. So,
Oh yeah, even when we were just driving around, anyone who's driven around public lands, like you're driving through public and then all of a sudden it turns into private. And of course, when we're driving through the private lands, that's when we're like, oh my gosh, look at that beautiful piece up there. And it's on private land though, so we actually used Onyx to help us find our way and make sure we're doing when we were out on BLM lands, making sure. And even like when we were on the property of the guys who we were allowed to cut on, we had that to make sure that we weren't crossing any property lines because they don't have fences like for their borders. So we were using that, like we were trying to make sure we were doing everything correctly as possible.
yeah, so we did do our due diligence on that side of things. I guess I'll just touch too, really quick about our problems, just because it's part of the trip, kind of. My problem getting home was like kind of crappy.
That was, yeah. So, no, so, yeah, what had happened? Like, I drove to Colorado, and then Heather, you flew out to, well, I picked you up in Amarillo, Texas,
Yep.
and then, we drove out together. No problems on the way there. And we even said when we were out there and we were collecting wood after we'd already done everything, we're like, man, everything went really smoothly. Like, it, what could go wrong kind of thing. We totally jinxed ourselves
Yeah.
because Heather, on the way back, you can kind of tell about how your story went.
Yeah, I got to the Amarillo airport and like the flight after mine. So it went from Amarillo to Dallas, Dallas up to Baltimore. And I remember I saw that the later flight to Dallas was canceled, and then all these people were trying to get on my flight. Well, it's like a beautiful sunny day, and we go and get on the plane, and then the captain's saying about how there's bad weather in Dallas, and they might have to change their course in case we have to go land somewhere else. Well, we all think we're about to go take off, and then he's like, we're not going to take off for another 4 hours. So then everybody of course, gets off the plane, and we're trying to figure out, like, well, I guess we're going to have to get another flight. And I finally got up to the front desk and talking about it, and they're like, we can't get you on a flight till Monday. So I'm like, man, I'm going to be stuck this was on a Saturday. I'm going to be stuck in Amarillo.
Amarillo, Texas.
Yeah. Like, got to figure out, like, I don't use public transportation. Now I got to figure out how to use an Uber or whatever. And, yeah, so thankfully, as I am up there, before they canceled my flight, I got a notification that the flight was boarding. So then I'm like, oh, crap. And I got to go run through TSA again, got on the plane, made it to Dallas, and then was stuck there overnight, which was okay. And then I finally made it home Sunday night. So, darn flights. That was the first time I ever had flight issues.
Yeah, and you had some major ones like that, luckily, thankfully, it wasn't like in the air kind of issues, you know what I mean? Like, it was just a matter of like the flights being canceled, and you had to reschedule stuff, and then you had to reschedule again. Like, it just was such a game of trying to get home.
Yeah, I accidentally scheduled a flight that I thought left Sunday morning at 6 a.m. And then before I went to bed Saturday night, yeah, I was like, I should just double check on this. And it was for Monday. So then I had to reschedule so that it left Sunday.
Insult to injury.
Yeah. Then I ended up in Miami, and then I had to go from Miami up to Baltimore. So it was a crazy, crazy trip.
Yeah, and we totally jinxed ourselves. Like, things are going so great.
Yeah, this trip couldn't have gone any
what
smoother.
could go wrong?
But it was a crazy trip. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a great time. It didn't feel like work most of the time.
And that was only the second time I've ever met you in person. Like, we would do this podcast.
I know, that is weird to think about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
never.
It didn't feel weird, though.
No.
Because we're here face to face, kind of.
That's why I think we talk all the time, so it didn't feel like, only the second time I ever met you in person. You're the same as you are on here, so.
Likewise. We're just, this is weird. This is who we are.
Yeah. You were saying that you brought a couple pieces home with you. And, like, I think you only took, like, 5 or 6 pieces, like, ones that really stood out to you when we were cutting them. What are your plans with those? Do you have any plans for the different pieces?
Yeah, I ended up taking about, like, I think it was maybe 10 pieces or 9 pieces, something like that. Yeah, it was more than I thought too. And it wasn't a ton because, like, again, my bed is small, my truck bed. And I didn't want to take away from, like, y'all, you guys use so much more of this wood than I do. So I only had, like, a handful of things I was, on my calendar to do that I needed some habitat for. So I've got a couple life-size bears that I'm going to incorporate some of the juniper into. And so, it'll just be a little bit cooler than a rock or something, right? And what else do I got? I wanted stuff for that. And then I got a couple like deer pedestals that I'll put a deer on a juniper instead of just putting it on, something else. And like this juniper wood, it just makes it look, it gives it an extra touch too. That kind of ties just back into habitat in general, like, making it something a little more special than just throwing dirt and rocks and leaves on a habitat. Yeah. It makes it a little more special for the customer and then just more of an art piece in general. So I was just looking for stuff like that. I got a couple bears that are just, they're life size. They got their paw on part of the log. I got one standing bear who's going to be like rubbing his back on a tree.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see how that works out.
Yeah, they're kind of smaller bears, but they're cool. They're super pretty, fluffed out, nice, pretty bears, and I'm excited to put those together too because they're just different than the average like game head that I typically do anyway.
Yeah, I think that'll look pretty cool because I know the couple pieces of wood you got for that bear I think will look pretty neat.
I remember at one point like we cut this one piece and I wasn't gonna take it for myself, and then we're kind of loading stuff up and I just kept thinking about it. Like it was on my mind like way too much. I'm like, Heather, can I take that piece? You're like, yeah. Like no problem. So when I tried to take pieces that only like made me trip my trigger just a little bit more because you guys, so I know you kept saying like, oh, this would be great for turkeys, this would be great for something else. Like you guys have a lot more like in the roster that you're gonna do that you need this stuff for. Is there anything like that you can think of off the top of your head that oh yeah, I got this project coming up that I'm gonna use this for, or anything like that?
Well, I know that we have a lot of African animals coming up, and we usually put not with twisted junipers in Africa, but it still fits that dry, like, deserty look. So we'll usually put some of that in there with them. So I know we would have to use it for that. We, of course, have to use it for the turkeys. I know that we got a couple pieces that it wasn't twisted juniper. It was some kind of pine or something. I'm not exactly sure what it was.
Yeah. It's like a pinyon pine, or maybe it was a ponderosa. I don't know.
I have no idea.
It was dead.
Yeah,
it was dead pieces. So it's kind of hard to tell.
Dead, and it was hard. And they look really cool. Like we have a few alligators coming up that like they looked very swampy, like, and they had a cool flow to them. So yeah, I know we'll use some for that. But a lot of the pieces work out really well for like if you're gonna do shoulder pedestal, like a wall pedestal type of deal, because the wood is so hard and dense and it's strong. So it holds up really well as a pedestal.
Yeah, even when it's not a very big diameter piece, like this wood is still like, it's very hard wood that can hold up a deer and like hold up different animals. So it's really nice quality versus like I don't know, just a regular old, like, I don't know, elm tree piece of wood that you can get. Like, it might not be as strong as like some of this desert wood.
Yeah, and if you get wood, like you said, like an elm or an oak or something, the bark is most likely going to fall off.
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's heavy. This stuff's pretty light when it's dry.
Yeah, it just makes overall, like, it's pretty and it's has a lot of good stability. So, and a lot of taxidermists use this juniper, like, when possible. Like, there is like a pretty good, I guess, market for it, would you say? Like, there's, you know, a lot of people like using this stuff for taxidermy projects for all the reasons we mentioned.
And you even asked, when I asked Ashley about going, she's like, there's like why are you going out to get this wood? Just because you don't live as far away from it as we do on the
Yeah, I'm
East
like,
Coast.
yeah, and there's people that will come to like the Oklahoma show. I don't know if they came every year, but they have a truckload of different, driftwoods or junipers and stuff, and they'll sell it. Like sometimes you can go to a taxidermy convention and some of the vendors are selling this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't really have that on the East Coast anymore. The people that did it seem to die, and like there's some people that were doing it, but like the wood they'd have maybe 3 nice pieces, and the rest would just be like limbs, like a piece of wood that, what are you going to use that for? So that's when we, kind of decided we'll get it. And, if anybody wants to buy some, like we'll have enough that we can have ours plus sell some to people. But yeah, like how else are you going to get it unless you go out there and get it?
Yeah. Yeah, you folks on the East Coast, just being further away in proximity to the kinds of woods that are good to use. And then, yeah, just how would you get it?
Yeah.
You could drive out yourself and get it, but it's just like it took a lot of logistics making it happen.
Yeah. And,
You know.
and there's so many people that we've even had that will tell about the wood, and they'll be like, oh, I got it everywhere on my property. I'll cut you some and I'll bring it out. One, they either never follow through, or two, they don't cut the right stuff, and it's just firewood practically they're bringing back because we can't really use it because it's
Yeah,
junk.
it is kind of like its own art getting this wood, and it gave me a lot of like a lot more respect for the people that do kind of make a business out of this, and they're collecting this stuff. Like we mentioned, it's kind of some gnarly terrain, and just getting to it, you got to drive out dirt roads and collect it. So it's a process. So it gave me a lot of respect for those people. And when you see like a piece that they're charging like $200 for, like that's a good deal.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Like, the stuff is valuable.
Yeah, that's what I say. Hey, like sell it, and if you don't want to pay for it, you just either use something else or go try to do it yourself because it's not easy to get to it, especially those big heavy pieces. Like,
Yeah,
it was back breaking and in a way, and it's a lot of work, regardless.
This episode of Wildverse is sponsored by Pro One Performance Chemicals. Pro One specializes in tanning chemicals for the professional taxidermist. They offer a complete line of tanning products to provide you with everything you need to tan your next hide. I really like their Pro Max Tan for my personal tanning projects. They make it so simple, it's easy to follow instructions printed right on the bottle. I actually used Pro One to tan the deer that I won with at Nationals, and I was using this same tan to tan some bobcats last week. It's super versatile. Not only does Pro One have you covered for all your tanning needs, they also sell Pro One Hide Paste, the industry standard in glue. Heather and I both use Pro One Hide Paste on every single mount. We love it. It has a thick consistency that makes it easy to apply to the form, yet it's soft and pliable enough that it can be easily manipulated under the skin after you throw the hide on. If you haven't tried Pro One Hide Paste, I am telling you, you are missing out. And now, as of 2024, you can order Pro One products directly online at pro1performancechemicals.com. That's PRO, the number 1, performancechemicals.com.
Oh, I guess kind of moving on from wood, we should start our kind of habitat section. And one of the first things that you need when you're going to do most habitats is a base. So if we want to kind of start on how we're going to put a habitat together, Ashley, like if you're going to order a base for an animal, how do you know what size to get?
Oh, good question. So when you're looking at the base, the main structure this animal's going to go on, obviously, like you're talking about, like, probably a floor piece, right? That's the base. and it's usually made of wood of some kind, unless you're doing some kind of really intricate process. Depends on just like what the, how big the animal is. If it's a life size, if it's just a game head, all those factors, and then, working with customers to try to figure out what the piece is going to look like. So, you know, there's just so many factors. How I approach it is like, when I ask my customers, literally like, do you want something really cool, elaborate, or you want something just a little more like standard that still looks good, something like a barnwood base? And then personally, I like to draw up a kind of a sketch design if I'm doing a bigger project and show the customer like, hey, how does this look? It's not going to look exactly like this because obviously, logistics. How's it going to fit and all that? But this is kind of like what we're shooting for. And yeah, no, oh, can you make the base, within these dimensions? It needs to fit in the house, in a certain spot. That kind of comes into play as well. But that's kind of how I approach it. How do you approach it?
I would say a lot of the same. You of course ask a customer, what type of wood do you want? What type of base are you thinking? Are you thinking a floor? Are you thinking a raised pedestal? So once you kind of figure that out, to figure out size, the most common thing that we end up with hardwood bases for is we do a lot of life-size bears, and we try to make the base really literally just long enough to fit the feet in, plus a couple inches maybe in length, and then you look at the width and just a couple inches wider than the bear is. Like, you're not wanting to oversize the bear or the animal that you're doing. You don't want to undersize it that it looks like going to be super top heavy if it's, walking elevated or something. So yeah, we just try to make the measurements within a couple inches of the size of the animal. Turkeys, we do a lot of raised, kind of like an octagon with a angled top on it, because that gives a nice flow once you add a branch and a turkey on top. But yeah, that's kind of what you aim for. You don't want too big and you don't want too small.
Those are good points. That the base you choose could definitely overpower the animal if it's too big, or it could, if it's too small, then maybe it doesn't even hold the weight of the animal plus whatever habitat you have on it. So there's just, you got to take everything into consideration. And like for a deer, for example, like if you're just doing kind of a standard pedestal with the base, making the base just about the size of the deer, obviously the deer, antlers are going to hang off of it and stuff, but making it kind of the width of like that body and the shoulders.
Yeah.
So, and that just looks good aesthetically and stuff. It doesn't overpower the mount or anything. Kind of complements the mount versus overpowers it. But yeah, so then when we get these bases in the shop, then, how do we go from there? How do you decide what kind of habitat to put on it, or how are you going to attach it? What do you guys do?
So of course you look at what the customer wants. A lot of the times, as I said, we do bears. They always have habitat. They either want it stepping up on a log, stepping up on rocks, or it's going to be flat, walking. So you just see what the customer wants, and that's what you're going to end up building onto it.
Yeah, and how do you decide what habitat to put onto it? You said you guys do like a lot of African stuff. Obviously, you're not going to be putting like a live conifer looking habitat on an African animal pedestal. So like making the habitat match the animal, that's, a good place to start too.
Yeah, and the flow of it as well. If you're going to do a deer pedestal, you kind of like, you want to pick out a piece of wood that maybe has a nice flow. Like if the deer is turned this way, okay, here's a good example. I have that deer back there in my video, and he's turned up and around. So I'd want the piece of wood to come up like the opposite way if I can. Something that's going to curve this way while he's curving this way type of deal.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Make it like, give it opposite ends of flow. And there's a lot of like you said, the golden ratio that Randy mentioned and stuff. Like there's a lot of art concepts that come into play when designing the composition for these bases.
Mm-hmm.
Not letting it overpower the mount, but then also having it flow. If you want to emphasize, something on the mount, giving it arrows to point to certain pieces.
Yeah. And I know too, like on the bears that we do, or even on a turkey pedestal, if I look at something, a lot of times the way I word it is it looks too heavy in an area. Like, let's use a bobcat walking down a limb, for example. If you just have like a little limb and the bobcat is walking downwards and there's nothing on this backside whatsoever, it looks really heavy over here and just everything is just this way. But then if you add maybe a rock at the base of the limb, or a little bit of, I don't want to say like grass, or like some other limbs like pine limbs, or just something to offset all of the weight down here.
I think balance is a good way to put it, right? Like
Maybe balance.
like you're saying it's heavy, so like your eyes are really focused on one part, and so to kind of take your attention off of that, balancing it out with something else, rock or whatever.
Yep. You have to train yourself to look at it and just see a flow.
Yeah, that's like in taxidermy in general. If something looks wrong, it probably is. Like if it looks like, why does that look funny? Or if it looks funny, I guess that's a better way to put it. If it looks funny, it probably does look funny. Because there is like concepts that there's like the art rules and stuff, but then you can break those rules too. It's not like you have to follow them, but there is like certain concepts that are proven to like, have the artistic flow. Gosh, we could do a whole series on that alone. That's a huge concept.
But that pretty much kind of covers that whole like what habitat you're going to add, between the customer, and you kind of figure out your layout of what you're going to do, artistically composed.
Yeah, and then so once you get like, okay, this is kind of my game plan, right, for the habitat. Like this is the, piece of wood I'm going to use. This is how the animal's going to be on it. And this is how, the whole layout's going to look. You get that kind of figured out. Then you kind of just, I guess for lack of a better word, decorate the base with habitat stuff.
Yeah, you got to do your actual habitat. So one of the first things that a lot of people struggle with are rocks. So I'll ask you, Ashley. I mean, I know you say you don't do a lot of habitat on a lot of your stuff because it's just shoulder mounts, but if you had to do a rock scene, how would you put that together?
Yeah, like you said, I don't do a lot, but I have done like a good fair share of habitat building, and it's not my favorite thing to do, but I do like how it turns out. I love putting together cool habitat. But anyway, so like rocks, I guess I personally feel like I kind of struggle with them sometimes, but I really like using the habitat rock, like the, what do you call it? The big sheets you can get of
the
pre-made
foam panels.
Yeah, panels, the rock panels that you can get. I really like using those. Just, it makes it so much easier. It obviously already looks like a rock, and it's really lightweight. You get this big rock panel, it's like a sheet, and you can either buy in a sheet or they'll break it up for you. And you take the pieces, you have kind of a frame that you're screwing them to, and then you just mache the seams. That's how I typically go about doing rocks when I have rocks to do. I prefer not to make my own. I just don't, I personally don't like that process, even though they do turn out pretty good. Or I'm not saying I make them pretty good, but I think that when people do them, they turn out really good. They look realistic, but it's just not my favorite way to do it. So I really like those rock panels. Those have been kind of a game changer in habitat building for me. But what do y'all do?
Yeah, we pretty much do the same thing. We get those rock panels. But the other thing that I really like, and I know it's not cost efficient for everybody to use this company that we use, but I guess it's like a little free shout out here. We use Rimback products because they're made here in PA, and we can just go pick them up. And they make, like, you can get these bags of just pre-made rocks, and they're flat on the bottom, and they're different shapes, big, small. They have river rocks, they have like actual rocks, and those are so nice when you can use them, because then you don't have to mache nothing.
What are they made out of?
Foam.
Oh.
They just like, yeah, have a mold
nice.
that's a whole bunch of them, and then they just pour them and sand the bottom flat. And yeah, they're super nice, because if we have a bear that, like, we've done some that are just walking flat, and it's like Pennsylvania mountain habitat. So that's mountain laurel, pines, leaves, and some rocks. And we can just literally in 20 minutes, probably not even, spray bomb the rock, mist over the rock, maybe mist a little dark brown, mist a little green, do a little tipping, another mist, boom, they're done. Stick them on the base. Like, we can put a habitat together, a whole habitat for a bear. If you don't have to build a whole bunch of rocks and stuff, you're talking 20, 30 minutes. The habitat's done.
That sounds really efficient.
It is. But yeah, talking about rocks, those are great to use. And another little rock tip for building rock habitat, we of course build that wooden frame like you were talking about, Ashley, and screw on the pieces and make different sizes and shapes. But when I go to mache, I like to have a I don't know, microfiber towel or dish towel, or even a sock, if you turn it inside out, has that like fuzzy texture. And I like to go over my seams with that.
Yeah, just some kind of texture. Okay, yeah, that's great advice too. Because I guess I've used like a paper towel, like the blue ones. They have kind of a nice texture. But yeah, you can use just it's good to do that kind of stuff versus like trying to, you know, use a paintbrush or something, or just trying to use your hands. It doesn't look as realistic. So that's great advice that you brought that up.
Because it is hard to get that texture right. It's either too smooth or it's like not, it's like too jagged.
Yeah, too
So
like perfect looking maybe to look a little imperfect.
the one thing I forgot to add was before I mache, I like to take a rasp and I'll go over all the joint edges to just get them to not be like, too jagged.
Oh, good advice. Like just one of those yellow rasps.
I use like big farrier rasps.
Oh,
Any
right.
kind of, I mean, maybe they'd work too, but the big flat farrier, I can just kind of go over it and knock any edges off. But yeah, so once you mache it and it dries, what's your process of painting it?
Yeah, rock painting, that's just another piece of the puzzle. My approach to rock painting, I like to use a whole different mix of different things. I like acrylic paint watered down. That's kind of a good go-to. It's simple. And I also like using like rattle can, like just spray paint. Sometimes that's good. Kind of like light coats. Airbrushing rocks too. I
Okay.
probably do it differently every time I make a rock because I don't do it very often. So like I probably do something different
You're
every
always
time.
you're always trying to do it better. So I
Yeah,
know what you mean by that. Like,
yeah. So what do you guys do for painting rocks?
a lot of the stuff you talked about, I've never tried airbrushing though. But the typical thing that we do is we'll, like you said, like rattle can it, because that seems to help seal off that foam. Like the foam will take paint different than that water-based paper mache.
Yes.
That'll soak up any water you hit it with, and then your colors get completely different.
Yeah, you put it on, it's really dark, and then all of a sudden it lightens up again. Hey, wait a minute, where'd my color go?
Yeah, it just takes it, like absorbs it in. But yeah, so we'll like rattle can it to make sure all those seams are somewhat sealed, that they don't suck all that moisture in. And then, like you said, we kind of change it up. I kind of start liking to like tip it first with like a acrylic, like a house paint. We usually get a jug of house paint, and then I'll like dry brush it and just go over it to hit all the textures. And then I like to then spray it with watered down, either water-based paint or the house paint. Anything that's water-based, you can water down. Spray over it while that tipping stuff is still like slightly wet, because it seems like it hits it and it gives it like a really nice rock look.
I think you've told me about this before, how you kind of have like a process where you're like, before it's totally dry, then you hit it with the other paint, right?
Yeah, it seems to like run through it really nice and like just gives a really natural rock look. But then the problem is it dries and it doesn't look the same.
I know it never
So,
looks the same as it does when it's wet versus dry. That's the
no.
struggle with painting rocks.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then there's like all kinds of colors you can choose. Like, different parts of the country have different colored rocks. And so
Yeah.
are you painting more of a red rock or a white rock or a gray rock, or, does this rock?
Tan.
Yeah. So kind of, it's good to match the territory too.
I've noticed a lot of the times on gray rocks, I almost like, instead of laying down a gray base, I almost like to lay down like a tan base
Mm.
and then go on top of it with like a gray wash and like gray tipping. And I like using a little bit of green in there, and then you can spritz it with some green, or you can get that like green flocking stuff and like throw on it.
Yeah, that's another portion that I'm sure we'll even touch on more, like how to decorate the rocks and stuff too. But yeah, like I have like a bunch of different colored brown acrylic paints that I like to mix up and paint rocks with. Um, you know, it's hard to say like some people will be like, "Oh, you know, your rocks should have been more this color or that color." And there's not really like a wrong way to do it. It is like if you're, you know, totally wrong, like if you have a, I don't know, a blue rock or something, like a bright blue rock, like that's maybe the only exception or something like that. But there's just so many different ways you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of covered a good couple of different ways that can help you out to try to maybe paint your rocks easier or nicer. I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess you kind of touched about putting like moss or like what do you call it, the flocking stuff, right? Putting that on the rocks.
Yeah.
So yeah, bare rocks, while they do look good, I like always, you know, decorating them up. I've got like just stuff I got at Hobby Lobby, like some of that like green, like mossy stuff, like a powdery kind of green.
Okay.
I think it's made for like model trains. So
Oh, okay. I think that's that stuff I'm talking about. It's like flocking. It's like it's not like fiber like flocking. They're like it's like
granules
you said,
almost.
it's like powdery.
Yeah.
Yes, more like granules.
It comes in like a canister.
Yes.
We all
and
use
you can
that.
they use it as like grass and like put on their bushes and stuff.
Yeah.
To make little leafy bushes.
Yeah. So like I think it's like in the model train section or like the diorama section of Hobby Lobby is where I've gotten this stuff, and I just like putting that on rocks. I think it gives it a really nice look, and just decorating them up a little bit, maybe using some like pieces of moss to glue in there. Dirt on rocks obviously looks natural.
That little lichen that you can get, not the poofy stuff, but the flat lichen. That stuff though can be really hard to make look convincing because
yeah,
I don't know, it's like you had either too much or it's not enough. Too much of a clump, not enough of a clump. Like, yeah, it's touchy.
have you seen that stuff? I think they sell it through like the taxidermy catalogs where it's lichen and I've never used it, so I'm kind of just guessing, but you put it on and then you take a torch to it and it makes it curl up. Have you seen that before?
No.
Yeah, you
No.
like, and it
I
makes
have
it
not
curl up like a lichen, like a dried lichen.
Oh. I have not seen that. Torching around habitat makes me
Yeah, we're using all these like aerosol, this flammable material, so
yeah.
use caution. But I think I've seen it where it looks pretty good. Looks realistic.
Okay. Huh. I'll check that out. I know, speaking of the torch and habitat, just the one guy I work with, I wasn't at the shop at that time, and it was a mink on a little round base with some water. Like, let it be a mink stepping up on a log with water, and a lot of the times, you know, you use that torch to get your air bubbles out of your acrylic.
Yeah.
But the grass and everything was already on this
no.
thing. And apparently he went to like hit it and it caught that grass and it went whoof, the whole thing like lit on fire. And thankfully it didn't hit the mink, but I think it might have singed a couple.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's
so be
use
careful.
caution, right? Oh my goodness. Good thing it wasn't like a big, you know, bear or something just to.
Oh, I know, really set it on fire. I know, I did. You can spray alcohol. I guess it's habitat water. You can spray like denatured alcohol or whatever on top of your water, and then that can like set it. I guess countertop people keep spraying it with alcohol until all the air bubbles are out of it, like after you light it on fire. No, I lied. Don't light it on fire and then spray it on, because that's what I did.
Wait, no, don't do that.
It was burning and I thought it was all out, but it burned so clear, and I was like, let me do it again. And then the same thing,
Oh, so is like the alcohol does it kind of like melt the resin or whatever just enough or something like that? Like
I think what it does is, because it needs oxygen, it sucks the air bubbles up out of it.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, like it's just, that's what the countertop people use. So I tried it out on something and it worked, but you don't want to do it around grass.
No. So that's, oh man, how scary. Because
yeah.
Do you guys do a lot of water scenes? I know that's a whole, you know, major category of doing habitat.
It is, and some people do some really cool ones. We do pretty just basic. I really want to go and learn how to do the super cool water scenes. because like, we try to do splashes, and some of them turn out nice, some of them not as much. I've molded some waves, but that's a lot of work. But yeah, not a ton.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done any kind of water scene or whatever. It's mostly not exclusive to birds and fish, but mostly done in birds and fish scenes.
Yeah. So real quick to finish up the rocks, if you're gonna glue on any kind of moss or anything, what do you use? You just use hot glue?
Oh, good question. I have used hot glue. I try not to if I can, if I've, I don't know. I try not to, but because those strings that the hot glue has,
Yes.
those are just you think you get them all, and then you hit the light a different way, and then you see a bunch more. And so I just try not to because of that. But it is really effective. I love using hot glue if it weren't for those strings that come off of it. I like using Elmer's glue a lot.
Okay.
Especially for like that, the granule stuff that we talked about, the green stuff. Paint a area of Elmer's glue and then literally just throw the granule stuff on it, and it kind of just naturally goes where it needs to. And then the glue dries clear. So that's my go-to as far as attaching stuff to habitat. Like I got those gallons of Elmer's glue and just use those. I like it, but it also, it doesn't dry as fast. So if it's something upside down, hot glue is nice to use. What do y'all use?
Yeah. We typically use hot glue, but it is a pain because like you'll put it on your piece of moss, and then maybe we have one hot glue gun is like the devil. Like it is so hot. If it hits your skin, you're getting a blister. Like it is just stupid hot. So then it'll slide through and burn your hand. And like you said, the little strings. But I had seen a cool tip for those strings is you take a hairdryer on hot, or you could use a heat gun, and you just go over your base with it, and it'll melt them strings, and they'll just disappear.
Oh, that's slick. Okay, I like that tip.
Yeah, it seems to work from what I've tried.
Hot glue's so nice.
It's quick.
Yeah.
It is nice. Yeah, but it can definitely hurt and definitely be a pain to work with as far as those strings go. But use that tip, see if that works.
Yeah.
Try it out.
I like that one.
So, speaking of attaching things, how do you do your grass and leaves and stuff?
Oh, good question. So all that kind of stuff. Well, I guess first I do a dirt base first. I kind of do dirt then that stuff. Is that how you do it? Like, do you do dirt then grass or grass then dirt? I guess you can do it either way.
We do it different. So first of all, you start.
Okay.
So how do you lay down everything other than your rocks that you're gonna put on there?
Okay, so everything other than rocks. That's a good place to start. So I guess even before dirt, I like putting down a layer of foam. If it's not going to be a totally flat base, even like that spray foam that comes in the can, it's like pretty cheap foam, right? I like putting just a layer of that down, and it kind of gives the ground more contour instead of just a flat, like, you're putting it on the wood. It's not flat. So I like doing that, carve that down into a shape, and then I put dirt on the habitat, right? And
how do you put your dirt on?
So dirt, I like doing, again, I go back to Elmer's glue, being super liberal about the Elmer's glue all over this foam, and then putting dirt on there. And just, any, like that, the Elmer's glue is obviously absorbing the dirt. Any wet spot, put more dirt on it, like cover the whole thing. Being liberal about it again, just packing dirt and everywhere. That's how I would approach it. And then putting grass and putting leaves on it, like once you have that foam, like I've literally taken like the stems of grass and just shoved it into the dirt, and it sticks in the foam pretty well. Like even when the Elmer's glue is like drying, it holds it in place. So I like that approach.
The fake grass that has the wire in it is what you mean?
Not like real grass. Just
I
guess we'll talk about the grass. Different types of grass too. Like stems, I guess fake stuff too, but mostly just stalks of grass, stalks of whatever. Decorating it, or like if you have a clump of grass, you can literally just like bore a hole in that foam and set that in. So that's my approach. I like doing the foam first, and then I think that gives it a nice like base to hold any kind of other habitat. So what do y'all do?
We typically don't, like I've done before where I lay the foam down, but at the shop I work at, we don't use We don't use that whole idea because we love our mud mix.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
the only downside is mud mix can be heavy. Like, it can really make a base heavy if you use a lot of it. Because it's pretty much, I swear it's like stucco mix. I'm pretty sure it's like a brown stucco mix, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So like if we have, we have our rocks there. If we want uneven texture a little more, we have some like old crappy Mackenzie rock that was yellow that we don't use anymore, because that's when they first came out, there's all yellow panels of rock. So we'll just like throw either some chunks of foam in on the base or something so we can lay mud mix over top of it. But we will put our mud mix in there and then stick whatever habitat we want. Like if we're going to stick them little pine trees, we'll just drill a hole down through the mud mix, stick the trees in, stick the grass in. Sometimes we put the leaves and then the grass so that we don't have to try to get the leaves around all the habitat. But everything just sticks in mud mix. And then at the very end, I'll take like peat moss, or at the bottom of the bag of our leaves will be all that forest, like crushed up leaves and dirt.
Okay.
Sprinkle that around to help cover up any mud mix that you can see.
And that just, it sticks to the wet mud mix. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like your adhesion, is it just sticks into that mud mix while it's drying. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. And anything that's not stuck in the mud mix, because it's usually a pretty thick layer of leaves, then I'll just spray over that watered down Elmer's glue on top of it, and then that'll lock in everything on top. Or if we're going to do like a lot of the Alaska scenes, it's a lot of moss, like moss and just dead wood. And then we'll just lay the carpet of moss on top of that mud mix, and all that under mossy fiber just grabs into that mud mix.
Okay, and that's how it just binds to it.
Yeah, and then we'll just stick the sticks on top, stick it down through. Africa, it's mud mix and grass and dirt and thorns.
So this mud mix, it looks like dirt when it's dried. Like you could leave it and it looks like dirt.
No, you couldn't really like not cover it up.
Okay.
Because it dries like a light brown, and it looks like stucco. Like,
okay.
It just doesn't, it wouldn't look like dirt.
But if it's exposed through the dirt, it's not going to look unnatural. Like it'll look just like a rock under the dirt or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, it won't stick out really. Yeah, it wouldn't really stick out. But like for the habitats like Africa that doesn't have like leaves all over it, you just make sure that like when you lay it down, like you have them little swirls and whips and stuff in it, because it's kind of like a paper mache, concrete, whatever. I'll just go over after I put the dirt on and just kind of pat down
and
to make sure that it doesn't have weird.
Okay, so you're covering this whole mud mix with like dirt and everything.
And what's nice too is we've done a couple Africa scenes, and even the one, my most favorite whitetail scene was where it was just a whitetail pedestal. He was on a fence post. No. Yeah, I think he was on a fence post. And the fence post had a deer rub on it. And then we had some like little cedars that we bought from Mackenzie. And I made fake rubs on those with like a stout rougher.
Oh, that's cool.
And some paint.
Yeah.
And right by the fence post, like coming through, we made a deer trail. So that's what was nice about the mud mix, is you could literally just like push a whole bunch of tracks in there and kind of make it look like it had been traveled a whole bunch.
Okay, so it sounds very versatile. Is this mud mix, I guess because I'm wondering, but I think other people might be wondering too, is this something like kind of a in-shop deal that you guys make?
No, we wish we could make it instead of having to buy it.
Okay.
But I think Headquarters sells it. It's a Nicholas Lindsay product, and he's from Pennsylvania as well. He's from Western PA, so I'm sure you could buy it from his site. Like I said, Nicholas Lindsay mache products, or products. He sells a lot of paper mache and stuff too.
Okay.
But yeah, you just buy a box of it and then add water, and it kind of looks like brownie mix.
Oh, okay. Is it
Yeah, like a brownie mix or a cake mix.
how difficult is it to mix up? Do you have to take like a paint mixer and mix it, or is it just hand mixing?
So if it's a little tiny amount, I'll just use like a metal spoon or something. But I like mixing it. Most of the time, you have to use a good bit of it, and we have like a perfect size bucket, and I like those metal paint mixers, you put in a drill.
Yes.
And I'll just sit it in the sink and run water and mix while I'm running water, turn it off when I think it's good, and simple.
Okay. So that doesn't sound like it's too terrible of a process. I know sometimes when you got to like mix stuff and it kind of makes a mess and it can just be a messy job. But if you have like an efficient way to do it,
I guess it could be messy because, like anything, you're mixing it, and it can get places you don't want it to get. And that mud mix, it's such like a gritty texture that if it gets in your clothes and it dries, like, you're not getting it out.
yeah, good luck.
Yeah, so make sure you get it out while it's still wet.
I guess that's kind of why I like using the Elmer's glue and then just, putting it on and then putting the dirt on. So I'm not mixing stuff because I've mixed Elmer's glue and dirt together and that makes like a really nice like base, but it's just such a pain to mix it, put it down, mix some more. Yeah, I don't like doing it that way. So I like the process I have, but it sounds like you guys have an even more efficient way to do it. But again, like they're both, potato potato almost, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter
Yeah, they both
of
work.
results. Yeah.
Yeah, I like using it for stuff that's, like you said, like upside down, almost like that zebra that I took to nationals in whatever year that was, 2022 maybe. That had a lot of different edges on it, so I just laid down hardware wire and smeared mud mix over it, and then you could kind of put dirt up on it.
I see, that's nice that, as far as things, gravity plays a huge effect. So in your guys' shop, sounds like you guys like using a lot of real habitat when possible, right? Versus fake habitat.
Yeah.
But you did say something about like some little cedars you bought. Obviously, those were probably fake.
Yeah, like they were really nice. They're from Mackenzie. They're not cheap, but we bought like, they were pretty big. Like you could buy 40-inch tall ones, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they looked really nice. So we went out and collected all those trees, and I remember you and I were talking about fake trees versus real trees. And of course, the fake ones can look really nice, and they're really lightweight, and they're not dirty. Like those pre-made ones that'll have like maybe an oak limb coming out, or those fake pine wall ones, and they're really nice. They're just expensive.
Yeah, that's the nice part about buying pre-made habitat, especially if you're buying like something that has like a rock and a limb and it attaches to the wall perfectly, or if it's perfectly flat on the bottom, like it is nice because they are so convenient. And then sometimes you can buy the form that literally like fits perfectly to these habitat pieces. That's literally just so nice to and quick. Set it on there.
Yeah.
It just makes it really simple. But like you said, they're really expensive. A lot of them look really nice, but sometimes you can kind of tell that they're fake. But when they're done really nice, they're probably lighter weight. They're gonna last probably longer than real habitat. I personally like using real habitat when possible. Obviously it looks real. Like you and I, obviously we went out and collected a bunch, so that wasn't like cheap, but if you're in an area, if you live kind of in the country or whatever, you can collect habitat yourself and it's cheap and it can look really good if you spend some time picking at it and get some good stuff.
Like you said, it doesn't look fake. You can use some fake grasses that you can make look nice. And there's a lot of fake things that will look nice. Your pre-made habitats are awesome because they do save you a lot of time. You just gotta make sure you charge for it. And there's pluses and minuses to both of them, I guess.
None of it's like wrong. I mean, you hear people say like, "Oh, I only use real habitat," or like, "I only use fake habitat," and like that's fine. But I'm mixing it up, using both. But
be flexible.
Whatever looks good.
And a lot of the times, the natural leaves are really nice. Like I really like using leaves on things because this is gonna kind of get in. I don't know if it's a debate. A good habitat has a lot going on. you know, you see a lot of habitats where people just have like a fake piece of grass and a single leaf on a dirt base. You know, it just doesn't look convincing. People are going to look at that and be like, oh, it might be easier to clean. You might be able to turn it upside down and nothing's going to fall off of it. But I feel like a piece of taxidermy is supposed to look nice. It's not supposed to be touched and turned around and moved up. Like, I don't know, we put habitat in there, and if you turn it upside down, yeah, some leaves might fall off and stuff, but it looks convincing.
Right. Or like if you go to shake it, yeah, something might come off, but realistically it's not going to, you know, turn upside down and be shooken around too much. And right. Or like if you go to clean it, and if you use like a vacuum, right, and you can vacuum up a leaf pretty easily, like there's almost no way to avoid that completely if it looks realistic.
Yeah, I feel like I'd rather have something look real, and maybe like a kid could pick a leaf up off of it than something that just is bare and doesn't look natural. I don't know. Yeah. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I know. As far as like competing, have you ever entered a habitat entry into a competition?
I did.
I have too, and sometimes that's another hot debate, right? But sometimes that can be like, you know, subjective. You know, it's very personal opinions and stuff. But I do know that, like, you know, they don't want anything to come off, right? That's kind of what I've noticed, is like if you have something that like will come, you know, or maybe if you had something big maybe, but if you had like snow, you know, you don't want snow to just be able to fly anywhere. Or like dirt, you know, you don't want to have to, if you blow on it, is it going to fly everywhere? I think for competition stuff, like it's a little more important to have it stable if you're being judged on the habitat. If you're not, then, you know, whatever. But if you're entering a habitat piece, that's a whole other can of worms.
It is. It definitely is. But so another thing about habitat is you are going to either have to have your animal fixed to it permanently, or it's got to come off. So Ashley, like if you do a pedestal, how are yours removable?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Attachment styles. If I'm doing a pedestal, if it's a deer head, I obviously want to be able to take that off, on and off, have it be removable. So like I just did a bobcat. I made that one permanent though, just because, you know, it doesn't weigh a lot, and, you know, having the customer having to take that on and off is just not really efficient.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, something small, I like to have them permanent, but anything like deer game head size or bigger, I like to have the option to remove them probably. But so I like using like a 2-part threaded rod system, right? Same kind of thing that you use for detachable antlers, like square tubing and square stock. I actually, it's kind of funny, I bought a bunch of that when I had a bunch of elk to do. I had 3 big elk. They were all detachable antlers, and I bought, so I thought they just came in singles, so I bought 6 of the threaded rod attachments they sell. They came in pairs, so I ended up with 12. Yeah, so I ended up with 12 individual pieces. I obviously used them on the elk as well, but then I was left with a bunch of these attachments, and they worked super well for habitat. So, like, you know, they're kind of short, but you don't need a lot when they're really sturdy. So I like doing that. I like using threaded rod system, and since it's square, you only really need one because it's not going to turn on you.
Okay.
What do y'all do?
Yeah, we'll use like the metal square tubing a lot. Small mammals you fix, like you said, like they have the wires coming out, so you just bend them over, staple them, cover it up type of deal for those. The wall pedestal, floor pedestals that we do, we just screw them in from the back and have 2 screws. Because then that way, if the customer ever wants to, a lot of times if they do a wall pedestal, it's because we tell them, if you ever want to take it off, put it on the wall and put a different one on your pedestal. It's super easy.
That's a good,
like we'll we'll finish the back that it's all leather, but just 2 screws. And then a different attachment system I don't use a lot, and this is kind of almost like a free little shout out here, is that TPS system. I really do like.
Oh yeah, so
they're just kind of hard to get sometimes.
The
Yeah.
taxidermy positioning systems, I think they sell them through Breakthrough, and those are very similar to like, you know, the square tubing, square stock system, but they are like they're literally made for taxidermy. So it's like, you have a sleeve on one side and the peg on the other, and it's seamless almost. And
Yeah, they're really
yeah,
handy.
so those are super nice. Like if you need an attachment, that's obviously efficient. Like, with the square tubing, square stock, you have to cap one side, and if you forget, well, now you've got a bunch of stuff in your tube, and I've done that before.
Yeah, or
So
you gotta weld it to like something specific, like a plate and a like. So that stuff, like for laying down animals on rocks and small mammals, like they work great. But yeah. So that's kind of covers the whole attachment removable topic.
yeah, I will say, like, some people, they use the threaded rods and then you'll screw them into habitat, right? And I think that works good, but um like I had to work on this mountain goat one time, and it was that's how it was. Like in the back, there was like a hole that you could screw it in, and so it made it like you couldn't take it off, but it is removable. So like you couldn't just pick it up and take it off. You have to unscrew it, take it off. So it maybe gives a little more security, but there is that.
That kind of covers that you reminded me about, like if you build rocks and something like a bear has, like you got to put a nut up on there to tighten it down. You just give yourself an access panel
Yeah,
to pop a piece of rock out and then pop it back in.
yeah, and that's an option. I mean, nobody's really going to be taking them off too much, so I think just setting them in there is usually efficient. Um, I will say, just while we're talking about attachments and stuff, for for competing, if you're putting together an animal on a base and stuff, one of the criteria is that it has to be pretty stable. Like if a judge goes to touch your animal and it moves around a lot, they could mark you down for it. So having a really stable attachment point is a key point for if you're putting a piece in a competition.
If they touch it and it wiggles around, you're going to get docked for
Yeah,
that.
I guess it would probably be up to them at their discretion, but it could make them mad if they have to like chase this thing around to judge it. I don't know.
So the last topic on habitat that we're going to kind of talk about are prices, because how do you charge for habitat? Like a simple pre-made Mackenzie or headquarters or research or whatever habitat, that's easy. You buy it, you add your shop rate of an hour or something like that, and that's their total. But custom stuff,
But yeah, custom stuff, like you're saying, that's when it gets tricky. So sounds like we're talking about a lot of custom stuff. How do y'all charge?
oh, we were just talking about this literally yesterday. We really want to put a price down of like our most common bases, what they cost, just the base. Like we're talking, a turkey is going to either be a floor octagon, a raised octagon. Those are the two most common, for a base. So you know what that costs. And then you can kind of have an idea of like, okay, on a piece of wood, the wood's going to be this much, a couple rocks are this much, whatever. So you can kind of figure that out, or you can just go with the old faithful of charge them 30% of what the mount costs.
Yeah, yeah, you hear that thrown around a lot, the 30% of the mount piece, or like, that's a good standard way to go about it. I feel like pricing on custom stuff is kind of like the magic question that taxidermists have
It
to
is.
answer. Uh, and that's a good rule of thumb. It's like 30% of what the mount costs. But if you're charging like $5,000 for a life-size bear, 30% of that is super high. So you're like, well,
I know it makes you feel bad, but
charging for habitat
I
make you
hate.
feel like a criminal.
Oh, I know. I hate sitting in front of a customer and trying to figure out what their total is going to be.
Yeah,
Like,
it's hard. I'm not gonna sit here and try to say I'm good at it, because I'm not. I probably undercharge myself more times than not. Because yeah, like you get the base, that's standard. You paid a price for it. You're gonna charge it to the customer. You get, you bought a piece of wood that looks nice. Charge that to customer. And then how do you charge for? Well, I used $5 worth of dirt, maybe. I don't know. Maybe $5 worth of whatever. Gosh, and then you start trying to think of it. So
I know it's honestly, I feel like when it gets questionable, just doing the 30%, because it comes back to the whole thing is you're being paid for your time and you're
yeah,
being paid for your knowledge. Learning how to do all this stuff took time and money, and practice, like, yeah, that's where it just gets really tough, because you feel bad, like, oh, okay, you paid $5,000 for this bear, and then 30% of 5,000 is I don't
It's like
use my brain,
1,500.
so.
It's over 1,500. It's like 16 something. Yeah.
But then you think, okay, this base probably cost $500
True.
maybe.
Yeah. So that gets eaten up really fast in terms
Yeah.
of material, and anything left over is your labor, which you're, I don't know about you, but like I've quoted like 6 hours of labor on a habitat deal, and I'm like, I have probably 20 hours in that. It's probably not right.
Well,
Like, what do you do?
Yeah, you're sitting back and you're looking at it, and then you gotta build all this stuff, and it is a lot of time.
Yeah, like, oh, and then I took 20 minutes one day just putting an extra piece of grass on it or something. So it's so hard to determine that. I think 30% is a good standard.
Yeah, because it just varies so much. Like, I'm not gonna get, now people will argue this and say that we should, but like, I don't get on the East Coast the prices that people do on the West Coast.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, it's a big difference.
Yeah, just in general, like across the board taxidermy, right? Like East Coast is, for whatever reason, lots of reasons, just not as high for taxidermy prices as it is the further you go out west, kind of thing, which is so weird. It has to do with maybe more taxidermists per square mile. They're closer to supply companies, but it really shouldn't matter that much, I think, but it does. So
yeah, I can see the supply company side, but yeah, that's a whole nother ordeal. But I guess just staying on habitat.
Yeah, back to habitat.
I say any custom habitat should be 30%, and your pre-made habitats, you want to make $75 to like $125 on top of what it costs you to buy.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, because you said like an hour's worth of shop rate. Well, then what's your shop rate? You can just keeps going and going, and yeah. So you're right. You really do need to like be honest with the time. $7,500 for even the pre-made habitat. You gotta attach it. You gotta decorate it up a little bit usually.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I think, a good rule of thumb. Don't cut yourself short. You spent the time to do it. You spent the time to learn it. You bought the stuff. And you know what? If a customer says they want to do it themselves,
have at it. Be my guest.
That's less time.
Yeah, it would be.
Go ahead.
It sounds like a nice relief. Yes, please do it yourself.
Yeah, but that pretty much covers, I think, our habitat talk for the day. And we'll try to share some of those videos. I know I have some habitat work that I'll try to video to give at least what I do. Yeah,
if, like we mentioned in the way beginning, like habitat is just, there's so many different ways to do it, which is super cool. It becomes like, an area where you can really try new things all the time.
It is, because you're always trying to make it better.
Yes. But yeah, I think that about wraps up our episode talking about Colorado and habitat and all the stuff, and it gives us a lot more talking points for future episodes too. I think there's just so much to this topic, but just give you kind of an idea of what we do and what we're going to be doing with this juniper wood. So we would like to thank you for listening to our podcast Wildverse. We hope you enjoyed learning about our habitat collecting adventure and how we incorporate these items into our work. If you would like to stay up to date on new episode releases, you can follow us on Facebook at Wildverse Taxidermy Podcast and Instagram at Wildverse Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wildverse Podcast, to see when new videos come out. We add a lot of cool pictures and videos to our episodes for our viewers to see what we're talking about. And we would also love if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to our show.
And we would love to see your habitats too, so feel free to send us pictures and tricks on what you love to do in your own work.
Yeah, that would be great. So thank you guys for listening.
Bye.
Have a good week. Bye.